Joining us now, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us.
Hey, Wolf, good to be with you.
So if Donald Trump wins tomorrow in Indiana, is he the presumptive nominee?
Yeah, it's really hard to see how he's not. I guess Cruz could maybe run just about every other race or every other win of the coming states and maybe be the nominee. But this is definitely a big deal for Trump if he wins tomorrow, because this was considered a Cruz-strong territory. So there's no doubt a victory for him will do a lot to seal him as the nominee. If he loses, this continues down the road. And from what I've heard, there's polling's all over the place. We have some of the public polling, but I've heard that there's some private polling showing it's actually a lot closer. So these are all turnout games, and it'll be fun to watch tomorrow.
Because you saw that Wall Street Journal, NBC News, Marist poll, which shows Trump in Indiana way ahead. He does have a lot more votes in all the 40 contests, primaries, caucuses, about 2.3 million more votes than Cruz. I guess there you can see the numbers on the screen. He's got more than 10 million. Cruz has 6.8 million. Kasich down to 3.6 million. If it is a contested convention, a lot of people, a lot of Republicans are going to be pretty angry since Trump clearly has millions more votes.
Yeah, and if they're angry, they probably have a right to be. The reality, though, is this is how it's done. This is how it's been done for many, many years. If we go to a contested convention, Donald Trump will have to work hard to win over the delegates, to work on a second and a third ballot strategy. They knew that this was how this worked from the very beginning. Now that they're caught flat-footed, they're kind of throwing out a lot of they're upset and sad. But yeah, people will be upset. They probably have every right to be, but this is how it's done. Now, if we want to revisit how we nominate candidates for the next cycle, that's probably a conversation that'll be welcomed.
Yeah, you'll have 4 years to come up with some new ideas if you want to do that. Let's talk about, let's say he loses tomorrow, Cruz in Indiana. He says he's in it for the distance, if there's a viable path for him. Kasich says he's still in it as well, even though he's got an even more difficult path than Cruz does. But for all practical purposes, if he loses tomorrow, will you be on board with Donald Trump?
No, I'm not there. Look, I probably will definitely not support him until at least the convention. And I have a hard time seeing how I ever get to yes on Donald Trump. I'm not a never Trump guy, but I'm definitely somebody that puts my country above my party. And in my view, what I've heard him say on foreign policy, what I've heard him say, how he's going to eliminate the debt but not touch Social Security, is not having real conversations with the American people that, frankly, my party has spent a lot of time trying to say, hey, look, here's the harsh realities of where we're facing, and these are way out. So leadership to me is not just about reflecting people's anger, not just about pulling up insecurities. It's about showing people a way out. And so I'm not there with Trump yet. Look, if he changes his tone and starts to have some good solutions, I could get there. But as of today, I'm not.
Ted Cruz wouldn't say if he'd back Trump in November if he's the Republican presidential nominee. I guess what's going to happen to the party? Let's say Trump is the nominee. How divided will the Republicans be looking ahead, let's say, to a Hillary Clinton general election campaign?
Well, the great unifier is Hillary Clinton for Republicans, so that will definitely work in unity's favor. But I think the question really is going to be for Donald Trump to answer. Is he going to change his tone from one of division, one of kind of complaining, whining when things don't go his way? Is he going to change it to talking about really, what it is that our party believes in, where he wants to take this country, with some detailed explanations, not just kind of populist rhetoric? He can unite this party, but it's going to take a major change and a major shift from how he's been so far. Look, I don't put it past him to be able to do that. I hope he can. But I kept thinking he was going to pivot to much more mature conversation months ago, and he hasn't yet.
One of your Republican colleagues in the House, Representative David Jolly of Florida, said today he doesn't know if he'd vote for Trump or Hillary Clinton in November. Under no circumstances, I take it, would you vote for Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump?
No, I'm not going to vote for Hillary Clinton, and like I said, I hope I can get to yes on Trump. But if I don't, I would intend to, you can always write somebody in or leave it blank and vote down ballot. It's the right, my right as a private American to make that decision. But no, I wouldn't support Hillary Clinton, that's for sure. It would be another 4 years of the last 8 years, which we've seen, which I don't want. But I hope Trump can come around. We got to see some real change, though.
Any chance you think Paul Ryan will come around?
I don't think so. No, I think he's made it pretty clear. I'd love to see a Paul Ryan as president, but I think that's probably not in the cards for 2016.
Yeah, you might have to wait 4 years or 8 years. a young guy, so you got plenty of time to work with him on that. Stand by, Congressman. We have much more to discuss. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He's a U.S. Air Force veteran, served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Congressman, Senator Lindsey Graham is predicting another 9/11 if Donald Trump is elected president. Do you think the U.S. will be more vulnerable to attacks if Trump is president?
I don't know. That's a tough one to answer. Look, I think he needs to change his. I think saying things like banning all Muslims is actually really putting it's dangerous. It may work for politics domestically, but it's dangerous because you look, for instance, in Yemen. The Saudis just recently dealt a huge blow to al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which, are a very bad strain of al-Qaeda. You have the Saudis pushing back the Iranians. You have the Jordanians and other allied regimes engaged against ISIS. To just make blanket statement like that begins to alienate the allies that we need to actually win these wars. So, no, I'm not going to go as far as to say another 9/11 because of Donald Trump. But I will say rhetoric has meaning and it has an impact. And I heard that when I just got back from the Middle East a few weeks ago. We heard that from everybody we met with.
ISIS is claiming responsibility for a Baghdad car bombing, killing at least 16 people, injuring 43 others. This is more than a decade, after the U.S. spent literally more than $1 trillion, hundreds of billions of dollars to try to develop a stable regime there, a stable country in Iraq, a secure military. For all practical purposes right now, has Iraq essentially become Syria?
No. Look, I think they're in the process of still developing self-governance. We had Iraq in a pretty good place in 2011, and in fact, President Obama himself said, when the last troops left, that we're leaving behind a stable Iraq. We were there. We were able to help the different sectarian interests have a dialogue and feel like they're empowered. Unfortunately, when we left, a lot of that under al-Maliki started to fall apart, and so there's going to be a lot of rebuilding to do. But this isn't Syria. First off, you don't have a brutal dictator that's killed 500,000 people. Secondly, you do have ISIS, but you have a national army that, as ineffective as they have been in the past, is now focused on retaking territory. You don't have that in Syria. You have a nationalist army that's focused on killing innocent civilians. But look, if we're not careful, if we disengage with Iraq, it could be another Syria. And frankly, you have the same concerns in Libya as we're seeing, and in Egypt eventually.
It looks like a disaster, though, in Iraq right now. Baghdad's the largest city. The Green Zone was invaded over the weekend. That's the secure area where American diplomats, the U.S. Embassy, other foreign embassies are there. The protesters got out, but still they moved into that Green Zone. And the second largest city in Iraq, Mosul, a city of 2 million people, now for 2 years has been controlled by ISIS, and the Iraqi military has done nothing so far to try to retake the second largest city. Why do you think it's not as bad as Syria?
Well, it's certainly a depressing narrative, that's for sure. You see as the Iraqis right now, with frankly U.S. leadership, which is essential in this, are preparing, I wish it was a year ago, but they're preparing to eventually take back Mosul. Keep in mind it's 2 million people. That's a huge operation. The protests in Baghdad were not necessarily ISIS-inspired. These were from al-Sadr, and these are people that feel disaffected by the national government. The president of Iraq is trying to bring people together again, and you have a lot of entrenched interests there that like the old system of doing business, the kickbacks, the contracts, and everything else. So, and then, look, a car bomb, as tragic as it is in Baghdad, this is what ISIS wants. They want to do a car bomb in Baghdad and say that the whole thing's fallen apart. Well, Baghdad's not in as bad a shape as it has been in the past. There's still a lot more to do, but this is far from Syria. Syria is the incubator of ISIS. Bashar al-Assad has created ISIS by his brutal tactics, by creating areas of non-governance, and Iraq gives us an opportunity, as tough and as bad as it is, to push them out and deal a huge defeat. Here's
the issue in Syria right now, Congressman. You know this well. You've been to the region. You served in the U.S. military in both Iraq and you served in Afghanistan as well. In Syria right now, at least 300,000, maybe 400,000 people have been killed over the last 4 years. Millions of people have been made into refugees, homeless domestically. They've been displaced across borders. But the fear right now, with the collapse of what supposedly was a ceasefire, the bad situation, horrendous situation in Syria right now potentially could get a whole lot worse. Do you believe that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this could get worse. This could spread to other areas, frankly, Jordan, Lebanon, Libya. It already has spread, I would argue. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the instability in the Middle East. The other big issue is this. You have a whole generation of children right now that are not going to school. I was in Turkey at a refugee camp, and the Turks are doing a really good job of trying to do what they can to educate these children, because when kids don't learn how to read or write, when they don't learn about the bigger world outside of themselves, they're fertile ground for terrorist groups like ISIS or the next generation of ISIS to come along and recruit from. So education is extremely important. When you have failed states, kids aren't being educated, families are being torn apart, and it leads to a lot of resentment. This is a fight. This is going to be going on for a long time, hopefully not in Syria, but this fight in general, we have to think long term. Kids that are going to school and learning how to read and write.
Yeah, what worries me a lot, and I'm sure it worries you as well, that in Syria, ISIS controls some cities, mid-sized cities like Raqqa, their capital, a few 100,000 people, but in Iraq, they control Mosul, a city of 2 million people for 2 years now, and the Iraqi military so far has done nothing to recapture, to liberate that city. It's a worrisome sign. All right, Congressman, thanks very much.